Reclaiming your authentic self isn't about becoming someone new. It's about recognizing how much of you was never allowed to exist in the first place and having the courage to gently, deliberately bring that part back into the light. Chronic shame rewires perception. You begin to see yourself through imagined judgment, not reality. And the hardest part about this is it doesn't feel imagined. It feels absolutely real. It feels like truth when you walk into a room and suddenly become hyper aware of how you're standing, what you're saying, how your voice sounds. It feels like truth when you replay a conversation hours later, convinced you said something wrong, something awkward, something that made people see you differently. And no one may have actually judged you in that moment, but your mind fills in the gaps so quickly, so convincingly that it becomes your reality. This is what shame does over time. It doesn't just make you feel bad. It changes the lens through which you see yourself. Psychologically, we know that repeated experiences of shame, especially in early relationships, can train the brain to scan constantly for threat. Not physical danger, but emotional exposure, rejection, disapproval, disconnection. So your nervous system learns to stay alert, always asking, is this safe? Am I too much? Not enough? About to be rejected? And when that becomes your default setting, something very subtle but very powerful happens. You stop seeing yourself as you are, and you start seeing yourself as you assume others see you. You become both the performer and the critic at the same time. And here's where it gets even more complicated. You adapt. You get really good at reading the room, adjusting your tone, shaping your personality depending on who you're with. On the outside, it can look like confidence, like flexibility, like social intelligence. But internally, it often feels like exhaustion because you're no longer responding from your authentic self. You're responding from a version of you that's trying to stay safe. And over time, that distance grows. You start to lose touch with what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually need. Not because those things disappeared, but because they were never given full permission to exist without consequence. So when we talk about reclaiming your authentic self, we're not talking about discovering something brand new. We're talking about gently questioning the stories that have been running in the background for years. Stories like, if I show this part of me, I'll be rejected. Or if I speak honestly, it will cost me connection. And here's the quiet shift that begins to change everything. You start asking, is that actually true? Or is that what shame taught me to believe? Because once you can see that your perception has been shaped, not by truth, but by protection, you create just enough space to choose something different, not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. And that's where the work begins to move from survival to self-trust. Authenticity feels unsafe at first because your nervous system was trained to avoid exposure, and that can feel confusing, even frustrating, because on one level, you want to be real. You want to stop overthinking, stop filtering, stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. But the moment you get close to doing that, saying what you actually feel, showing up without the mask, something in your body pulls you back, not gently, instinctively. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race, you hesitate, you edit yourself mid-sentence. And it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like protection, because it is. When you've lived with chronic emotional shame, your nervous system learns very early that being fully seen can come with a cost. Maybe it was rejection, maybe it was criticism, maybe it was subtle, being dismissed, misunderstood, or made to feel like your emotions were too much or not appropriate. Whatever the experience, your body absorbed the lesson long before you could logically process it. Exposure equals risk. So now, even in safe environments, your system doesn't automatically update. It doesn't say, this is different now, you're okay. It says, we've been here before, let's not make that mistake again. And this is where people often misinterpret their own healing process. They think, if authenticity feels this uncomfortable, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But discomfort doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It often means you're doing something unfamiliar. There's a difference. Your nervous system isn't designed to prioritize truth. It's designed to prioritize safety. And if for years safety meant hiding parts of yourself, then showing those parts now will naturally feel threatening, even if it's exactly what you need. So instead of judging that reaction, there's a different way to meet it. With understanding, you can begin to recognize this fear I'm feeling. It's not a sign that I should stop. It's a sign that I'm stepping outside a pattern that once protected me. And when you shift into that awareness, something softens. You don't force yourself to be completely open overnight. You don't throw yourself into vulnerability in a way that overwhelms your system. You start smaller. You practice honesty in moments that feel just slightly uncomfortable, not terrifying. You say the thing you would normally hold back, but only a little more truth than you're used to. You let someone see a genuine reaction instead of the polished one. You pause before automatically agreeing and check in with what you actually think. These are small moments, almost invisible from the outside, but internally they are powerful because each time you do that, you're sending a new message to your nervous system. We can survive this. Being seen doesn't always lead to disconnection. And slowly that old association begins to loosen. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to create space. Space where authenticity no longer feels like a threat, but something you can grow into moment by moment with a little more steadiness and a little less fear. Healing starts with awareness. Naming shame weakens its control, and that might sound simple on the surface, but it's not easy work because shame thrives in vagueness. It lives in that quiet, undefined space where you just feel off or not enough or something's wrong with me, but you can't quite explain why. And as long as it stays unnamed, it gets to operate freely. It shapes your choices, your reactions, your relationships without ever being questioned. That's the power it holds in silence. But the moment you pause and say, this right here is shame, something begins to shift, not because the feeling disappears instantly. It usually doesn't, but because you've just moved from being inside the experience to observing it. And that's a very different place to stand. When you can name what's happening, you create a small but critical distance between you and the story shame is trying to tell. Instead of I am not enough, it becomes I'm noticing a feeling that tells me I'm not enough. And that might seem like a subtle change in language, but psychologically, it's powerful because now it's not your identity, it's an experience. Research in emotional processing shows that labeling emotions, putting language to what we're feeling, actually reduces the intensity of those emotions. It engages parts of the brain responsible for regulation, allowing you to respond instead of react. In other words, when you name shame, you begin to take away its ability to run the entire show. But here's where it gets honest. Most of us don't want to name it. We'd rather call it stress or overthinking or just having a bad day. Because naming it as shame, that feels heavier, more exposed, more real. And yet, that's exactly why it matters, because shame doesn't dissolve through avoidance. It dissolves through recognition. It's in those moments when you catch yourself shrinking in a conversation and you gently acknowledge, I'm feeling ashamed right now. Or when you hesitate to share an idea and instead of immediately pulling back, you notice there's a fear here of being judged. You're not trying to fix it in that moment. You're not forcing it away. You're simply telling the truth about what's happening inside you. And that truth has a quiet kind of power. Over time, as you build that awareness, patterns begin to reveal themselves. You start to see when shame shows up most strongly around certain people, in certain environments, in specific situations where old fears get activated. And that awareness gives you something you didn't have before, choice. Because once you can see the pattern, you're no longer completely controlled by it. You can pause, you can question, you can decide, even in small ways, to respond differently. Not perfectly, not every time, but enough to begin loosening shame's grip. And slowly, what once felt automatic starts to feel interruptible. What once felt like truth starts to look more like a learned story. And that's where healing quietly begins to take root. You don't rebuild yourself by force, but by practicing small moments of emotional honesty. And this is where a lot of people get stuck because we've been taught in so many ways that change has to be dramatic, to be meaningful. That if you're going to heal, it should look like a complete transformation, clear, visible, undeniable. But that's not how this work happens, especially when you're coming out of years of chronic emotional shame. Because force is familiar to shame. Force says, fix this, hurry up, be better already. Force sounds a lot like the same inner voice that made you feel like you weren't enough in the first place. So when you try to rebuild yourself through pressure, through harsh self-discipline, through constant correction, you're not actually stepping out of the pattern. You're reinforcing it. What creates real change is something much quieter, much less impressive from the outside. It's honesty, but not the kind that demands everything all at once. Small, intentional honesty. It looks like catching yourself in the middle of a conversation where you would normally agree just to keep things smooth. And instead saying, I'm not sure I see it that way. Not aggressively, not perfectly, just truthfully. It looks like noticing that you're overwhelmed, even if part of you wants to push through and pretend you're fine, and allowing yourself to admit, this is actually a lot for me right now. It looks like recognizing when something hurt you instead of immediately minimizing it or explaining it away, and letting yourself feel that, even if you don't act on it right away. These moments are small. They don't feel like breakthroughs, but they matter more than the big declarations, because every time you choose honesty over performance, even in the smallest way, you are interrupting a pattern that may have been running for years. And your nervous system pays attention to that. It starts to learn we can tell the truth and stay safe. That doesn't mean every moment will go smoothly. Sometimes honesty will feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it will change the dynamic in a room. Sometimes people won't respond the way you hoped. But this isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. Because when you consistently override your own truth to keep things comfortable, you slowly lose trust in your inner voice. And rebuilding that trust doesn't happen through big promises. It happens through kept ones. Through those small moments where you show up honestly, even when it would be easier not to. And over time, something shifts. You don't have to think as hard about what to say. You don't have to rehearse every interaction. You don't feel that same level of internal tension because you're no longer carrying the weight of constantly managing how you're perceived. You're simply responding, from a place that feels more aligned. And that alignment builds quietly, one honest moment at a time, not forced and not rushed, but real enough to hold. The goal is not perfection, but self-trust. Learning to believe your inner experience is valid, and that can feel like a radical idea, especially if you've spent years questioning yourself, because when shame has been present for a long time, it doesn't just affect how you show up. It affects how you listen to yourself. You start to doubt your reactions. You second guess your feelings. You wonder if you're overreacting, being too sensitive, reading too much into things. So instead of asking, what am I feeling? You start asking, is what I'm feeling even right? And that shift, it slowly disconnects you from your own inner world. You begin to rely more on external cues, how other people respond, what they expect, what feels acceptable, rather than your own internal signals. And over time, that creates a kind of instability inside. Because no matter how well you read the room, it never fully replaces the clarity that comes from trusting yourself. That's why perfection becomes so tempting. If you can just say the right thing, act the right way, avoid mistakes, then maybe you won't feel that uncertainty, maybe you won't feel exposed, maybe you won't feel wrong. But perfection isn't a path to safety, it's a moving target, and chasing it keeps you stuck in the same cycle, constantly adjusting, constantly correcting, constantly trying to earn a sense of enoughness that was never meant to be earned in the first place. Self-trust works differently. It doesn't ask you to get everything right. It asks you to stay connected to yourself, even when things feel messy, unclear, or uncomfortable. It's the ability to pause in a moment and say, This is what I'm experiencing right now, and I'm willing to take that seriously. Not because it's perfect, not because it's convenient, but because it's yours. And that doesn't mean every feeling needs to be acted on immediately. Self-trust isn't impulsivity. It's not about reacting to every emotion without reflection. It's about acknowledging your inner experience as real and worthy of attention, instead of dismissing it before you even understand it. There's a psychological principle here that matters. When people consistently invalidate their own emotions, it increases internal conflict. The mind and body stop working together. You feel something, but then you override it, suppress it, or question it so quickly that it creates tension instead of clarity. But when you validate your experience, even quietly, even internally, you create alignment. You might still decide to respond thoughtfully, to wait, to choose your actions carefully. But that decision comes from a grounded place, not from self-doubt. And building that kind of trust, it takes time. It's built in moments where you honor what you feel, even if you don't fully understand it yet. Where you allow your reactions to exist without immediately labeling them as too much or not appropriate. Where you stop abandoning yourself just to maintain comfort in a situation. And slowly, that relationship with yourself begins to change. You feel more steady, less reactive, less dependent on constant reassurance. Not because everything around you is perfect, but because your connection to yourself is stronger. And that's the shift. You're no longer trying to become flawless. You're learning to become reliable to yourself. And as you keep moving through this work, questioning old patterns, choosing honesty in small moments, learning to trust what you feel, there will be days when it feels clear and days when it feels heavy again. That doesn't mean you're going backward. It means you're doing something real. So be patient with yourself in the process. Stay curious instead of critical. And remember, reclaiming who you are was never about becoming perfect. It was about coming home to yourself.